Thomas Green here with Ethical Marketing Service. On the podcast today, we have Elliot Evans. Elliot, welcome.
Thank you, Thomas.
Would you like to take a moment and tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. I always explain this in a slightly different way. Never quite know what the best way to do it is, but the short story is I'm a coach. I coach on confidence. I coach on careers. I coach on anything and everything, but I found that the majority of my work tends to come back to fear. How I see it, and this is not an original thought of mine, is most people when they come for coaching or they ask for advice or they seek a mentor, they know what they should be doing. They know how to do what they want to do, but still they're not doing it. And what I found to be the number one reason people are not doing what they know they should be doing in order to get what they want is they're scared of something. They're scared of the typical fear of failure, typical fear of the unknown. There's obviously lots to be anxious about in our modern day world. And with a little bit of digging, I tend to find that focusing on where that fear is and finding some peace within that fear is the quickest, most effective, most rewarding way to help people get what they want.
In terms of how you learn or how you help people do that, are you able to do that because you went through it yourself, or is that training that you've had?
Both. Another perhaps trope in the coaching industry, like if you think about where coaching came from, the world of sports and performance, most, let's say, Novak Djokovic's tennis coach was probably quite a good tennis player, but I hope I'm probably sounding really ignorant because I don't actually know who his tennis coach is, and he might be a really famous ex-tennis player. But most of the best coaches in tennis, golf, acting, etc., didn't have glittering careers in tennis or acting. They didn't have the natural talent that most incredibly successful players did. They had to coach themselves from average talent just to be in the same bracket as these incredibly naturally talented people were. So that's sort of how I see myself as a confidence coach. Is I've not been confident most of my life. Most people who met me before I became a coach would have said I wasn't an unconfident person. I was good at pretending that I was reasonably confident in social situations. But yeah, I definitely had to teach myself, coach myself, encourage myself, parent myself essentially through fear to a place of confidence. And that's what gave me the raw inspiration to want to be a coach. And then, of course, I trained as a performance coach, as a quite sort of general performance coach. So the kind of person you would come to if you wanted to get a promotion or you wanted to solve a certain problem, go after a certain opportunity, and did that for a couple of years, and then naturally started to form the niche in confidence and career coaching. So when I say career coaching, it's specifically helping people transition from an employment-based career to running a business or a passion project or, a non-employment-based career. So, and obviously that transition involves usually a lot of fear and a lot of hesitation. So yeah, very long answer to your very short question, both.
Well, you mentioned parent yourself, and I think a lot of these things do come back to your upbringing. So did you feel like you had that guidance when you were younger, or did you feel like you
Yes,
had to develop it yourself?
I. That's a good question. I'm certainly not the kind of person that I have no right nor desire to throw my parents under the bus. They were great parents. My dad was sort of my first, without me or him knowing what a coach was. I don't think coaching was even a buzzword, until recently. He was my first coach in that he would. So if I had a problem or I wanted some advice, I needed help. If I asked my mum, I would get the typical. I don't know if it's feminine. It's not necessarily a feminine trait, but typical, more parental style advice of, I am older, more experienced than you. I know better than you, so you should do this. Like, do this. I'm almost certain it'll be better for you. Whereas if I went to my dad, I would get more of a. He would just question me. He would keep asking me questions until I'd found a place of, not a place, until I found a source of confidence to be able to move through the problem feeling like I'd solved it myself. And it
It's
was,
kind of like what coaching's all about, right?
as far as I can tell, and I had that beautiful juxtaposition, and it made it really clear to me how I reacted as a person to, especially as I got older and older. When you're a child or an early teenager, you love the advice. You're just like, somebody tell me what to do and I'll do it. And, I'll get the gold star. That's great. But as I progressed and life becomes more complex and the problems become more complex, that sort of dad style coaching approach, I resonated with a lot more. And then I, I actually originally wanted to become a counselor after having a bit of a nervous break. So I was a financial speculator, a foreign exchange trader in a hedge fund until about 4 or 5 years ago, and I crashed and burned out of that career in quite a spectacular fashion. Had a nervous breakdown, and as I was coming out of that, I did so much self-reflective work that I decided I wanted to help other people do that kind of work. So I decided I wanted to become a counselor because I'd had experience being counseled and thought it was very helpful, and kind of thought it was the only way in to that world short of becoming a full-on psychologist. And I didn't have a spare 7 years and £100,000 to spend on that avenue. And it was whilst researching, going down that road, that I was made aware of what coaching was. Did a little bit of research, realized that it was the positive side of psychology and asking questions and all that lovely stuff. And that was just a much better fit. Plus, the cynical side of me realized that I could do like a 6-month trading course and be a qualified coach and get started. Or if I was a counselor, I think it takes 3 years in the UK to get to the point where you're accredited, etc. So that eager young ego in me was like, yeah, come on, let's just get started.
Well, in your message to me
Yeah,
before the podcast, I thought that the turning point for you was about the amount of self-development that you were doing. But was it a
yeah,
combination of that and the job?
yeah. Good question. There was kind of this crossover point where I suppose I basically, in the space of about 6 months, I went from weed smoking teenager with no drive whatsoever to like suddenly super driven. First I wanted to be a musician, then it was work in finance. Like, I was super driven and doing all of these self-development, self-help activities, some absolutely mental ones. And that period of my life lasted from about 18 until 24, 25. So about 7, 8 years of like what a friend termed relentless self-betterment. So just it was way too much. It was unsustainable. Always trying to be more, always trying to be better, always using the stick rather than the carrot to get myself where I wanted to be. And from about, I think it was 21 to 24, I was working in a hedge fund, very small hedge fund, and was really bending over backwards to make it as a trader. Um, I was working 14-hour days and trying all these different approaches to diet and supplements and exercise and sleep to like optimize my body. I've always had until recently, I've had a big problem with insomnia and sleep. So that was kind of one of the problems I was always trying to fix. And all of this kind of stress and over focus on myself and my performance was in a way I was trying to treat an intense background level of anxiety by focusing on my performance, because when I was in the zone, I didn't feel particularly anxious. And so after about 7 years of this way of living, you can probably imagine I'd built up a lot of stress. I was quite fatigued. I was very fatigued, and I was running on fumes. And I got invited. So I lived in Canada for a couple of years when I was working for this hedge fund, and then I got invited back to England to for a promotion, for better pay, higher level of authority within the business, all this lovely stuff that was very exciting. So I came home, dug up my life in Canada, came home, and within about a month of being at home, the business had gone into a voluntary liquidation. And then about a month after that, we'd all been sent home from the office. About a month after that, an article appeared in the Daily Mail, or I say an article, front page headline appeared in the Daily Mail of hedge fund managers steal 50 million in client funds. And the two guys in the picture were the two guys who used to run the hedge fund I work for. And it was this combination of being utterly exhausted, making such little progress in my career as a trader, and putting so much effort into it. And then this trust that I had in these two mentors of mine suddenly being cut away. All of that happening at once, just my body just went enough, shut down for 2 or 3 months. For the first month, I was pretty much bedridden, and then slowly started to come back to life physically. And then it took another 6 months or so before mentally I had any sort of inspiration to do anything again. So it was it's kind of a lot of moving parts culminated in this one explosion. But it was kind of beautiful in the sense that it forced me to do nothing for a few months and realize that I was still okay. Like I didn't, whatever it was that I feared so much that would happen if I did nothing and if I didn't push myself, I had to live through those fears. And after 3 months of doing nothing, I realized that I was just as happy, which admittedly wasn't that happy, but I was just as happy as I had been when I was pushing myself. And the world hadn't fallen apart, and my friends still wanted to hang out with me, and was still meeting new people and still had a roof over my head. And it was kind of a forced realization that I didn't have to kill myself trying all the time.
You mentioned initially before about how you were really trying to achieve, and you didn't feel, I think the word you used was anxiety when you were achieving, trying to make it as a trader. Do you know why you had that anxiety?
Yes. I think, well, I know as well as anyone knows in these situations. I I think I fell foul to something that a friend of mine calls the achievement trap, which is a long-winded, fancy way of saying that I sought validation externally. So all of my well-being, at least I tricked myself into believing that all of my well-being came as a result of others thinking I was good enough or thinking I was worthy of their respect. And how I got that respect from them was achieving things and being outstanding and better than my peers and doing things that no one else is willing to do. That this was what was quite interesting about the self-betterment drive, is that although ostensibly it was in service of a greater goal and of a big achievement, for example, trading or being a music producer or running events or any of the things that I decided week in, week out was a new obsession. What it was also about was proving, my badge of honor was, I will put myself through things that nobody else I know is willing to put themselves through. Like I did a 7-day water only fast. I ate nothing but red meat for a month. Really not proud of that one anymore. I did something called the Uberman sleep schedule, which is where you sleep only 20 minutes every 4 hours. So you have a 20-minute nap every 4 hours, and that's it. You just do that on repeat. I did that for about a month. Probably caused myself about a year's worth of health problems as a result. And I would revel in explaining this to people because it was my badge. That's what made me different. That's what made me unique. That's what made me special. And I believed that people respected me and loved me for that. And that was my identity. And so that the anxiety was that if I didn't keep on pushing, nobody would nobody would love me. Nobody would respect me anymore. And I wouldn't have anyone. So
that's all going on an unconscious level, presumably. But I'm very interested to know what you would say to someone. Let's say you're coaching someone and they're probably not doing it at that extreme level, because that's quite hyper achievement you're going for there. But let's say you see these traits, these self-development traits, and they're obviously trying to fill some sort of gap that they perceive that they have with it. What do you say to them?
I would ask, what does it give you? I tend to find repeated questions are a way into people's deepest self. So I would ask something like, if somebody came across displaying this sort of addiction to self-development like I had, even if it was more chilled out, I would pick up on the specific thing. So let's say it was a new diet, and say, what does it give you? What purpose is it trying to achieve? And more often than not, the first couple of answers I get are reasonably surface level, like, I want to lose weight or I want to have more energy. Okay, great. And so more energy, what does that give you? What does that achieve for you? Whatever the answer is, let's say, oh, I can do more work, can get more done at work. Okay, great. What does that achieve for you? Promotion and that. And we keep going and going and going until it comes to something on the emotional level. It usually comes back to, you can always trace these things going on in the external world back to something on an emotional or belief level, a core belief level. And that's, once we're into that, once we're down a few layers from the surface level, then it's a matter of working back or down, I was saying, but it's also working backwards to when in your life was the first time or the first period of time that you didn't feel like enough, that you suddenly weren't enough. Like you said, that gap, it creates that gap. And if we can get back to that point, and sometimes it takes a few conversations, because a lot of coaching and therapy, etc., is about building rapport and trust so that somebody feels like they can open themselves up in that deep level to me. But that's how I see my job, especially at first, to help people to feel comfortable and safe enough to open up to that deep level. I just keep asking similar questions. Like I said, it might be, what does that give you? It might also be, if I'm feeling that someone is particularly robust, I would just go straight in with, what's the worst that could happen if you didn't, or if you stopped dieting, if you stopped self-development? And then I keep going along that fear route. So, okay, and what is to fear about that? This is where the confidence coaching comes in, because you can really, if I can facilitate somebody sitting with their fears for half an hour or an hour, going deeper and deeper into them, at the end of that hour, most of the time, I can ask a question like, how does that fear you came to the session with at the start look from this place of peace, or this place of acceptance of the fear? And people can reflect on how something that they thought they were scared of, actually, now they've talked it all the way through and thought it all the way through to its, I suppose, the end of the train of thought, they are somewhat free of it, or at least they have now a choice. They have a choice between that feeling of peace, the sensations of peace in their body, versus the sensations of fear. So I hope that answers your question. I was tempted to give a soundbite of sort of advice, because that's probably more useful on a podcast, but I didn't want to betray my values as a coach. Like I'm quite a pure coach in that I will really try hard not to give that parental advice I talked about at the start, because I don't think it's anywhere near as valuable as somebody searching deeper. But to give it to someone who's not in a one-to-one conversation with me, I'd just say, get a pen and paper out, ask yourself one of those two questions again and again and again and again. What's the worst that can happen? And the follow-up to that is, what's the fear about that for me? And if you are really into a certain area of self-development, what is the purpose of this? What is it giving me? And ask that again and again. And the key is to not rely on the inner voice in your head alone to go through that process, because as most of us know by now, the kind of monkey mind jumping all over the place every 5 seconds can't really focus on one thing. So get it out on a piece of paper, type it, etc. I guess that's the advice I'd give, is to question yourself.
Great advice. I particularly like the at what point did you feel like you weren't enough, tracing it right back to where it begins, because it's a lot of self-knowledge, searching for why you are the way you are, kind of like that process. But coming back to your story for a moment, you because we were at the point where you were taking essentially a few months off. What happens next for you?
So, two things that I feel very grateful for that happened next. One, having been very into self-development, I remember Jordan Peterson saying he had this, I think it's called self-authoring program. And I remembered back in my heyday of self-development, I bought a license for this. And I just thought, oh, I'll just give it a go, filling it in. And it was essentially like a very long self-reflective exercise. You talk about a little bit about your past, not very much focus on that, a lot about your present and a lot about your future. And if I reflect on it now, it was essentially coaching yourself. It's as close as you could get to effectively coaching yourself. Just some great questions, very structured way of differentiating between your present and your future and all the different types of goals you may have for your future. So a real solid introduction to the kind of benefits that coaching or anything like that can have. And I took that to the extreme, as is my personality type. I think I spent like 4 hours a day writing this for a couple of months. So a lot of work went into it. Found it very meditative and flowy and enjoyable to write about myself. Probably says a lot about my ego. And so that was a big part of it, was feeling like I had taken some control back of my own fate. And that process helped me let go of trading. It took another 2 years before I'd completely let go of it. I was so attached to this future image I had of what my life could be like as a professional trader. I wanted to be like the Instagram photos, sitting on beach with laptop, working for an hour a day. All I need is an internet connection, and I can make silly money as a forex trader. That was the thing for me, and it was in service of my creative goals as a musician, as a music producer. I wanted a job that paid the bills and let me live comfortably, but took very little time, so that I'd have plenty of energy left over to put into my passion of music production. But somewhere along the way, I got more absorbed in the trader lifestyle part of that, and less. I forgot about the music, basically. So detaching from trading and letting go of this like dream millionaire beach lifestyle was a couple of year-long process, and was kicked off by this self-authoring program. And then the other key thing was when I discovered that coaching was a real thing. I got a career coach. So another part of me discovering coaching was that still had that hangover of the achievement focus and the achievement trap, and being very type A about going after things in an aggressive way. Coaching, when it came to careers, the word coaching sat better with me than counseling, because it seemed a bit more like, yeah, let's get after it kind of thing. So I got career coaching, and I was very lucky because my career coach was, at the time, he was quite new to coaching and should have been charging a lot more. And he took it from, we went in with the surface level problem of, I need help with my career. And within about one session, he'd intuited that I needed help with a lot more than my career. And it was so powerful for me that I completely took that on. When I started coaching, I remember saying to so many people, yeah, I don't want to coach in businesses. I don't want to coach executives because it's all surface level BS. I don't want any of that. I want to get to the core. Like I want to be working with people one-to-one on their deepest issues and all this kind of thing. And I still believe that now. But what's changed is that I now also believe that anyone coming in with any surface level problem, within a few sessions, if they're the right personality type, we can go down to that level. So yeah, receiving coaching and doing a lot of self-reflective work are the two things I would credit with dragging me out. And that's selling short my family and my supportive network completely, who, put up with a lot of moping and probably a lot of very boring conversations for them. So yeah.
Thank you for that. You touched upon like the concept of a trader lifestyle, and one thing that the whole beach, should we say? I mean, it just makes me think of receiving a pitch. It's like pitch for courses and high price programs and that sort of thing. And am I reading into that, or did you receive that message over and over again to the point where that's everything that you wanted?
Yeah, I got shivers then when you said that, because yes, absolutely. Forex education, online Forex education world is about the scammiest world I've come across so far. Made me feel it's quite dirty being a part of it, actually. And I'm sure there's worse things out there. And actually, ethical marketing service, you've probably got a lot of experience with these not so authentic and reputable marketing styles. You've probably come across them quite a lot in your journey. But yeah, my God, yeah, they really pushed look at let's rent a Lamborghini for a day, take loads of photos with it, and push that as essentially the only backbone of our course. Is that, look at this guy or gal. I was part of a school for a year or so, trading school for a year or so, that basically they lent very heavily on the good looks of their female founder to push a lot of their marketing through. And there were plenty of other ones where it was, blokes with nice watches with Lamborghinis holding a big thing. I mean, there were so many tropes. I honestly felt ashamed afterwards, after all of this had happened, that my BS detector didn't start going beep, 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 beep. How is this? It was like being in a trance. It was incredible. Like I'd drunk the Kool-Aid so strongly. And I don't come from, my dad's quite skeptical. I don't come from that kind of background where, we believe in things that are too good to be true. But it was scary. Yeah, it was scary to reflect on it now. It was quite scary how I got all caught up in it.
Yeah.
And looking at, I'm not on Instagram and I don't really use Facebook, but when I do see my friends on Instagram and I look at that kind of world, it still scares me it's so intoxicating. It's so dangerous, I think.
Yeah, it makes me think about the contrasts of what the truth is versus what is pitched. So in your case, the being a trader is positioned as someone on a beach working 1 hour a day, but you get the reality of it. And the reality of it is like, what are we talking, 12, 14 hour days, to the point where, you risk your health. And that's really how much of a lie it is. And it's worth highlighting that. What do you say to someone who is like, yeah, I really want to be a trader? What's your advice to that person?
Find somebody in real life. If you meet them on the internet, fine. Meet them in real life. Obviously, be safe, but meet them in real life. Find one person who you can verify beyond a shadow of a doubt is making money consistently over multiple years as a trader. You need to see their account, real live account statements from their brokerage account, and this is a lot to ask. If you're going up to someone and saying, can you teach me how to trade? Now show me all of these things. I realize this is a lot to ask, but if you don't do this, you're potentially wasting a lot of time and, like you say, risking your health. Find that person that you trust beyond a shadow of a doubt, get the proof, and then ask them to mentor you. If that costs you money and you've got the money to burn on that venture, fine. Even better if they're willing to mentor you just because they like you and they want to share their wisdom. That I think that screams genuine far more than somebody who wants your money. But if you can't find that, my honest advice is, well, two things: forget about it, and then go back to those repetitive questions we talked about earlier in the session. Why are you doing this? What are you afraid of happening if you don't do it? What's it supposed to give you? Because I'm not convinced, especially in the modern day world of algorithmic trading and quantitative analysts, that there is profit. I don't think there is a business model on a business scale and on a personal scale for individual point and click traders, as they're called nowadays. People looking at screens, looking at charts, looking at data, and making speculative decisions. I think maybe in the stock market, there's potential for that. But in currency, forget about it. Like, unless you can find that guru that you truly trust and can verify, just move on with your life. Don't waste the 4 years I did. That's the only advice I can give, really.
Well, I think your questions probably do the job. So when you actually dig deep enough, you realize that you're just essentially trying to do it. Or generally speaking, I think people try and do it for the significance, because they think people will think they're great, or they'll feel a certain way if they're perceived as this, high earning trader. And did you ever get any closure on your business mentors regarding the Daily Mail article?
I got a message from one of them a couple of years afterwards saying, like, basically, can we chat? And I said, if you've got anything to say, just say it here. And he said, do you know how much money the other one stole from the business? And I was just like, I don't need this. That was enough closure for me. These guys they're playing off against each other. I don't know whether one of them was more crooked than the other one, and one was genuinely had the wool pulled over his eyes. I don't know. I think I got closure for me. The problem, and I don't think I've got closure on this yet, is I recommended some people in my life to invest in this company, and they lost some money. And that was something that I neglected to mention earlier when you were saying what led to this breakdown. That was also there was a lot of guilt I felt for these people losing money, and for me having the wool pulled over my eyes and encouraging them to invest. So I don't think I got closure on that. Liquidation. I think the liquidation case has been going on for 4 or 5 years now. So perhaps when that comes to a close and there's some answers to what was really going on, and maybe some people get some money back, then that's closure. But yeah, no, I think the answer is no. On a personal level, for my trading career, I've got closure, and for interpersonally between me and the two guys who used to run the company, I've got closure. I don't want anything to do with them anymore, and that's fine. But between me and the people who invested, no closure.
Well, you got I'm presuming, some very positive stuff going on with your coaching. So have you got any favorite case studies or examples that you'd like to share?
Yeah. So this guy, let's call him John. It's not his name. Let's call him John. He quite early in my coaching career, it was the experience with him that made me think I can really do this. He called me a day after. So this was right at the start of lockdown one, so March last year, or yeah, I think it was March. His business had just had to close up shop in Barcelona because of COVID, because of lockdown. So he'd ended he'd been sort of traveling around the world for 5-10 years, and he'd had to end all of that, come back to the UK with his long distance girlfriend, and they were in an Airbnb in the countryside. And so he'd lost his business, wasn't sure what to do there. He had his ex-partner, who he had a child with, who was Norwegian, lived in Norway, had just had a difficult situation for herself personally, and meant that she was no longer able to look after their child. So he was having to organize her and their child moving to England and settling them there and buying a house so that there was space for them, and all this, all of the stress that comes with that. And then the day before he called me, his girlfriend had walked out and left with no explanation. He'd just gone out on a walk one morning, came back, everything was gone. So it was like crisis point for him. And in our first conversation, we kept coming back to this word, stability. He wanted some stability. He needed some stability in order to get his composure and keep moving forward and be the best dad he could be. And after about, I think it was 5 months, we worked together. He was back together with his partner. That was one of the things he wanted to work on, was getting back together with his partner, his girlfriend. They were back together. He'd bought a house in Surrey, in a nice area in Surrey, and his daughter was going to a good school there. He'd settled his ex-partner nearby, and he was starting to be able to focus on himself again and looking into the next steps of his career. So he was a director by trade, or at least he hadn't been a director by trade. Sorry, he wanted to be a director, had gone to film school, but had worked in other businesses up to this point. And he had the time, energy, and passion to start really devoting himself to that. And since then, I actually met up with him for the first time, saw him face to face yesterday, actually. We went for a bike, we went mountain biking together. And he's just been invited to Mallorca to do 2 weeks worth of filming, directing and filming on I don't think he told me what the project was. But anyway, he's off there at the end of the month, and he's got 2 other part-time gigs working in environmentalism and sustainability. So yeah, that was that was one of those moments where when we finished working together, and I really felt like I can make a big impact on, I'm never going to make a big impact on lots of people's lives, but I could definitely make a really big impact on a few people's lives.
Highly meaningful.
Highly meaningful, yeah. And that's very cliche, but I don't make a huge amount of money. I make enough. I support a very nice lifestyle, but the actual coaching sessions for me now, from a selfish standpoint, I find them like a meditation. Like I know the process well enough where I'm not thinking about what I say next. I'm not thinking about what the other person is saying. I'm just usually eyes shut, listening with my body and listening with my ears, and waiting for an inspired response, something coming from my gut, my inner wisdom to a question, maybe a point in a certain direction, and it doesn't feel like work. It feels like I'm just present for that other person, and I feel extremely grateful for that. Really, so
Well,
yeah,
well done.
thank you. Yeah, and it's a complete juxtaposition from trader life, but I suppose this is interesting. Coming back to what you're saying about the advice for somebody who's getting into trading, maybe I would just say go full in, because you only know what you really don't want to do and what's truly important to you when you epically fail at something. Well, that's not the only way, but that's one of the ways you get to it. And I remember watching a video on the necessity of having a breakdown and how important that can be for some people as a turning point in their lives. And so if going, full on into trading is how you hurry up and have your breakdown and realize what life is really about for you, then, get on with it, work 16 hours a day, burn yourself out, I guess.
Do you get more of a kick out of the examples where people are particularly struggling and you turn them around? Or is it just rewarding across the board?
It's just rewarding across the board. I certainly get, as I get more into coaching, I get more of a kick out of the coaching on the, like, working with thought itself. I almost said spiritual, but I know that puts a lot of people off because I'm not religious at all. But working on the level that helps people detach almost completely from their own thought, and therefore from anxiety, from depression, from their own moods. So helping people light up to the fact that their awareness, who they really are, is separate from their thoughts, and they can have some relief from their constant ongoing thoughts in their head. I think the quotable line is, the mind is an excellent servant but a terrible master. And I remember hearing that quote for about that when I was in self-development and anxious. I heard that quote so many times and I was like, yeah, cool, I understand that, great, next. And since having my breakdown and becoming a coach, I now feel like I feel that with my whole body. It's one of the most beautiful insights I've ever had, is this isn't running the show. There's something behind it that is. And the more I can identify with what's behind it, the more calm, the more peace, love, joy, all those, all the tick boxes you want to feel, the more of that I can be. And I'm starting to formalize the process with which I help people have that insight. And that's where I get my kicks these days, really.
Sounds very, very mindful.
Yes.
Like a very chilled dude.
Mindful is a lovely way of explaining what it took me about 10 minutes to explain there.
Well, I asked you, or I spoke to you beforehand about the fact that I was going to ask you about your goals. And I'm fascinated to hear what your response is in relationship to what you think about the concept of goals based on everything we've talked about today.
Yeah, I don't have any. You probably might have expected that answer. I don't have any goals. And I'm smiling so much because I can remember, if you'd have asked me this even a year ago, when I was already a coach, but even a year ago, you would have got a very different answer, very well thought out answer. And if you'd have asked me 3 years ago, we would have had to have a 2-hour podcast because I wouldn't have stopped talking for an hour. I don't have any goals, and I don't think goals are bad, but I also don't think goals are good. I think goals are I believe goals can be very helpful for a lot of people, and I help people work on their goals. One of the ways in which I build rapport and trust with clients is help them work on their goals, so that they know that, I want to go wherever the client wants to go. but once I've got that rapport and that trust, I'll start questioning in a slightly different way that helps them to see that although their goals may help motivate them, they are also probably one of, if not their biggest, like ambition is probably one of, if not their biggest source of, I am not enough, of not being worthy. Because a coach of mine once said, it's like having an ambition or a goal is like writing, be thinner on a tennis ball and then playing fetch with yourself, like throwing it off 50 meters in the other direction and going, I'm not going to be satisfied or enough until I get that ball. And it's like, at least when dogs play fetch, they get the ball and they go, Rawr, and they enjoy it for a bit and they run around. Whereas as humans, we just go, I got the ball. And then you rub off thin and you go, I want to be rich. And then you throw it again and you're unhappy. So you might have like a very temporary feeling of satisfaction. But it's not, if you're in that habit of sacrificing your present well-being for an idealized version of your future, it's going to be those moments of satisfaction are probably going to be very transient. And so I help people with goals keep throwing that tennis ball so that when they get to that point where they get it and it's very transient, I can go, so just tell me about how it felt to achieve that goal. And then sometimes that opens up a crack with which we can delve into to look at, right, what might be what might be a more fulfilling way to live your life instead of that constant playing fetch with yourself.
So we can walk away from the tennis ball.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Or just hold it and look at it and play with it like a dog would. So I don't have any goals. I don't have any goals. Sorry, that's not a very inspiring answer. But there it is.
I like the answer just because you're the first person who has said, I don't have any goals. I typically ask it on every single episode. And some people, very clear, I've got exactly, I even had one person who had like a 30-year plan broken down, which is, I never heard that before, but everyone has a crack at the answer, but you're the first person who has said, no, not doing that.
Oh, good. Well, I like that. There you go. That's probably a light suit to one of my goals, to be individual.
There you go. Is there anything that you feel would be of value to the audience that I haven't asked you about?
I think the quality of questions you ask yourself defines the quality of your experience. And that's probably the biggest value of coaching traditionally, is it helps you get into the habit of questioning yourself in a way that leads to confidence, peace, self-realization, etc. So all I would say is, if you're struggling or if you want something you don't have, get into the habit of asking yourself questions rather than trying to think about the solutions first.
It's a great point. I think lots of people presuppose the answers rather than asking good questions. So thanks for that. Elliot, where's the best place for people to find you?
Now, this is a question I don't have a good answer for. I've had so much feedback from clients that I should have a Facebook. I just don't like social media, but I should have a place that people can collect and either converse or whatever. Basically, I'm a terrible businessman. So I'm going to start a Facebook, but that's not very helpful. So what I'd say is, I will chat with anyone. If anyone wants to chat, can we put my email address in the show notes?
Sure.
Or I can read it off here and now. It's just elliottthecoach@gmail.com. If anyone wants to just chat, very happy to do so. My business model is, I talk with someone for at least an hour and a half before there's any mention of money and programs and all that rubbish. So if anyone wants to talk for an hour and a half about what you've got going on, that's the best way to be in contact with me. So my email address will be in the show notes. And if anyone's interested, I look forward to hearing from you. And maybe eventually I'll have a Facebook.
Well, I'm not in the least surprised that you don't have social media, and I'm not an advocate of heavy social media use in any way. So I kind of
Yeah,
I get what you mean there, and I also
yeah,
think that I'm sure that a conversation with you, which is focused on, you know, the value to the other person, is going to be extremely beneficial. So I guess thank you very much for doing that.
thank you. That's very kind of you to say.
All right, Elliot. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Thomas.